Welcome to Tales from the Trenches, Season 4. Today, I'm honored to have Penny Harris with me.
Here's a story of a fundraiser who was launching his very own web show. Each episode is very short due to edits, so it can really flow. Here's a story of a podcast guest star who was busy raising money of their own. They were each great in their own way, fundraising in the zone. Till the one day when Jack asked a guest to join him, and they knew it was much more than a jest, that these guests must somehow form a resource. That's the way they all became the podcast guests. The podcast guests. The podcast guests. That's the way they became the podcast guests.
Penny Harris coaches nonprofit leaders, including fundraisers, to focus on the mission to renew donors and make them partners providing a community service. For more than 35 years, Penny's professional experience includes establishing, managing, and growing fundraising programs and campaigns. She's experienced in developing relationships with donors and has interviewed 1,000 donors throughout the U.S. Before becoming a professional fundraiser, Penny was a community volunteer leader with the League of Women Voters. For 10 years, she served at the local, state, and national level. She produced the first candidate meetings in her small community and produced the first statewide debate for governor and U.S. Senate with public broadcasting. It was leading these events that she learned fundraising. Her first professional position was with the Maine Public Broadcasting Company. She was appointed by the governor to the University of Maine System Board of Trustees and served there for 10 years. So welcome, Penny.
Thank you. Welcome. Good to be here.
You know, I get calls every now and then for people, a lot of folks who are graduating college or university saying, I'm graduating, I have a liberal arts degree, and that can get me absolutely nothing. Like, I'm qualified to do nothing in life. So I'm thinking about, the fundraising world. Can I, take you for a drink and pick your brain a little bit? And so what advice would you give yourself if you were kind of go back in that hot tub time machine, as they call it, and just starting off in the fundraising profession? What advice would you give yourself?
I think I would spend more time thinking about, what do I want? Where am I in my life right now? And what do I want? And then I would ask, or if I were talking to somebody or myself, I would say, okay, where do you want to be? What do you think you want to be? And then what's your constraints? What are your challenges? What's stopping you from doing that? And then just kind of process it. Because I do think that no matter who you are, these are personal decisions that have to be made. And you have to take ownership of that, and I think that's and I did, you just keep falling into what you see other people doing. Something looks good. This is going to work. I know this. But I think it's a serious step about what you want to do. And I also think if they decide on fundraising, they really negotiate. I was just talking to a fundraiser the other day, and she's looking for a job. And I said, you want to negotiate. You want to know exactly. If you don't want to write grants, then you want to make it clear. And how much time what a priority is it to renew donors if that's something you believe in? And if that isn't, then don't take the job. I mean, I think I heard you kind of say that on one of the interviews I heard.
Right. It's interesting because people just take it for granted. If Mr. Smith has been giving you, $150 every year, that he's going to give it again. And while that may be true for some donors, some you actually have to put the effort in. You can't take it for granted. Just because you've been getting it for the last 5 years doesn't mean that you're going to get it next year.
Absolutely.
But a lot of times the boards will just say, yeah, 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 what you did last year is great. Now we need you to go up to this level, without realizing that it takes a ton of work just to maintain that level.
Well, and I think we look at fundraising, we don't start with what is your philosophy, what is your guidelines, what are your principles, like the making that first document, that's what that does. Until you have what we do in fundraising, and certainly I have, you jump into the tools and tactics. How are we going to do it? Where are we going to get people? And I just no, we don't start there. What are you doing? What are you asking the community to invest in? Why? And get them talking about the mission, and then get that clear so that you can communicate that. And if you've done the kind of document and had the kind of conversations, then you and the board gets more confidence and more competence in being able to share all the same thing because it's right there in that document. They then can be flexible, take out different parts, because I have them put in stories that show the benefits of the and the from the beneficiaries, and also the donors, some donor stories. Why is that happening?
So I've sat in on more interviews than I care to remember, for fundraisers, and I always do it with at least one other person, and many times I'll just realize after the first 90 seconds this ain't a fit, and I'll cut it off because I don't want to waste anyone's time, including my own. But if you were to hire a fundraiser today, what are kind of the top 3 traits that you would look for in a fundraiser?
I would look for someone who's grounded, who knows who they are, and can tell me and answer those questions that I just said. And why is this important to you? What do you want? What do you not want to do? And if they don't have the answers, then they can go find them because they're right in here. Does that make I hope I've answered your question.
Yeah, no, no, totally, totally. So one of the great questions I always like asking folks is what's the best solicitation that they've ever been on, and then flipping it to the worst. And this is tales from the trenches, right? So everyone's got to say what it was. You don't need to divulge names or amounts if you don't want to, but just tell me what was the best solicitation you're on, and why was it the best?
Well, it's been a long time since I've actually done a solicitation, so I don't have a specific one, but it always mattered how they felt about the organization, and how it was important that I work for things that I liked. And I used to have, when I did the public broadcasting for the business people, I asked them about, their experience, and they used to have more stories about how donors said, "Oh, we love that you're underwriting the news," or whatever the program is on public broadcasting. So that was the biggest motivation for them to continue. Their customers, their people would say thank you to them. And so I'm just really strong in feeling it's a community thing. And I remember my very first gift that I gave was my father told me he'd give me an allowance, but I had to give part of it to the church. I couldn't choose a mission. I had to give it to church. And I remember putting the money in the tray as it came by you in the church and thinking, "Oh, now I'm a part of it. I'm here," even though maybe it was a quarter, it was like whereas when I just passed the tray, I was just sitting there facilitating that. And so that's stuck in my mind, that this is important. It makes a difference when people I was lucky enough to read the history of how the hospital I worked in, how the community had come together. They decided they needed a hospital. So they have a community of people who were like, a committee that put the hospital together. And then when it was up and running eventually through the few years, then all of those people had different roles. Some of them were doctors, some of them were nurses, some administrators, some were just donors and they just were going to keep giving money. So that helped me see that this is a community thing and that donors need to feel to be a part of it. And people in the organization need to welcome the donors, need to feel a thank you for that, you know.
So how does that work? Every fundraiser I've met is working at 120% capacity. And, the mid-level donors or even the entry-level donors, there's such a huge volume of them, right? It's
Mhm.
very hard to have those conversations with donors because there's only so many hours in a day. So you tend to kind of throw them into bulk things, right? So everyone gets an email thank you letter or everyone gets a newsletter, but you might only be able to pick up the phone and call a very few people a day, a week, a month, whatever have you. So how does that kind of balance out?
Well, first of all, I think, yes, you're right. You have to have different kinds of communications, especially the more donors you have. But I figured if you've got 2,000 individual donors, which is, a beginning kind of thing, and you take 5 days a week, that's about 8 people. And and there's lots of things you can do, even just leave a voicemail message. Thank you. We got this. If you want, call me or send me an email, however you want them to do that. And um it's things can be much quicker than you think they are, and yet they feel the impact of having heard from you. And no, I think in the letters, how you write them, you don't tell how great you are and all the things you're doing. When you've got a donor, it's thank you for enabling us to serve our community, that we're all part of the same team kind of thing. And I was mentoring a fundraiser a couple of years ago now, I think, and she showed me the letter that she was sending out, direct mail, and we changed the beginning of it so that the donor, when you pick it up, if you look at it, it feels like the letter is to you, and they're talking to you, and they recognize and you feel seen. She said her response rate went up higher that year because she felt that, because it was more human. So I think yes, it matters how, and I think you break it out and look at that list and assess. I think somebody who's been giving for 10 years doesn't need as much time, but you want to know what they want to know, so you give that to them. And then call me, let me know, send me an email, I'll get back to you, so that you have that kind of relationship with people. And I think when the year ends and you've got all the donors, I call them current donors from 2024, you want 90% to renew the next year. And that's how you build what your capacity is and what your, and because this is a business too, in terms of a structure. And then you talk with them. You first of all, you update them on what was done, what was be able to accomplish, because how many donors there were, and something about that. And then follow it up with something where and you say to them, invite them. We you want to continue your commitment to this mission? What would you need to know in order to make that decision? And then is last year, I noticed you gave in May. Would you like us to approach you in May this year? So you develop that kind of interaction, which is human, that you would have with anybody else. And it takes a while, believe me, it takes a while. And I've been working a lot of years trying to get where I am in terms of talking with you today. And so very few people are beginning to but um do what I'm saying. But and so I'm looking for people that want to have a fundraising program and want to keep their fundraisers and want to keep their donors, and I want that. I'm only going to coach. I can't run their organization for them and help them with, as you know, and I have the mission centered giving it's a system, which is what I'm finding out anyway. There's no such thing as this annual system where you renew 90% of your current donors. It isn't even a goal. It isn't even,
No.
people don't care about it because they want
No,
that
it's
new
that churn
donor.
is huge, right?
Well,
Exactly.
and even the technology, they don't have the technology that can give you this information either, because people aren't going to buy it. They want to know how to get new donors and all of this data that says you've got a good chance to get you if, that's not fundraising.
No,
That's raising
no.
money for something, but it's not the community sense.
Penny, it has been an absolute pleasure getting to chat with you. There's a reason that you've been in the business so long. Your passion just shines through,
Thank
and I
you.
think anyone who chats with you sees that. If people wanted to get hold of you, how would they go about doing that?
Well, my email is penny@Renewable Philanthropy, and I'm on LinkedIn. That's probably the quickest way, and I'm on Substack, but I think that's a little harder. I think LinkedIn is probably the best, and my email, penny@Renewable Philanthropy. And I have a website, too, which is renewablephilanthropy.com, which needs to be
Amazing.
updated.
Amazing. Penny, thank you so much for your time. I really
Thank you.
appreciate it.
It's been fun to talk with you. Yeah, thank you very much.